Hey, I'm just a boy who wants to have fun. So I like to hang out with other boys who like to have fun. Like, for example, our buddy Jack Morgan from Texas Public Radio. That guy is just a party waiting to happen. Captain Morgan, perhaps? That's next on Radically Rational, the podcast. Hey, and welcome to this episode of Radically Rational, the podcast. You know how this works. We're bringing facts back into fashion. We're making simple sanity sexy again. We are rejecting crazies of all stripes. Crazy ain't cool. And remember this, we're not crazy, but some of y'all are pretty sketchy. Those are the rules, and if I violate them, I hear about it from an 8-year-old girl.
That's just not logical.
And I do anything my granddaughter tells me to. This is fun. This whole thing, we're just trying to have a good time here. So we brought in like a guy who is like a human party. He is like Six Flags with a liquor license, is the way I would describe him. You wouldn't object to Captain Morgan, would you?
No, I'll drink to that.
This is Jack Morgan from Texas Public Radio. And the first thing I got to say, you think public radio and you think public broadcasting. So, no, man, you're supposed to have on a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches and a bow tie.
Drive my Volvo up and park it.
Exactly. What's going on here?
I'm a real guy. What can I tell you? You were saying that we're supposed to be sane and sexy and bring it back and be sexy. I can do the sane part. I don't know about the sexy part.
You're doing absolutely fine. I have been so much looking forward to this because I have followed your career and I am aware of your range of experiences. And that's just kind of the thing that I covet in a human being the most, is the range of experiences. It is not an exaggeration at all to say that you've pretty well done it all in broadcasting.
Yeah, I think so. I got started in San Angelo, and after a couple of years went to Austin, worked at KLRU, where they did Austin City Limits for, 35 years or something.
What a wonderful show.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Yeah, it was great being able to be there in the afternoons for the sound checks.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I missed a really good one. Who's the amazing singer who does country music? The woman who's quite gay and just an incredible voice.
Katie Lang.
Katie Lang. She came and went to her sound check, and she was very testy. Not nice.
I've heard that before, actually.
Well, and it's like you get a lot of the language from the band. The band was like turned away from her when they were playing. It's like they didn't want to meet eyes. It's like I thought, and she was incredible, even in the sound check. But I elected not to go back that night for the show.
Yeah. And
I asked one of the guys there, I said, how did it go last night? Oh, it was classic. It was one for the ages. Doesn't get any better. And I was like, really? Well, I went and she was really kind of, not nice during the sound check. Oh, she had an hour's sleep. She had played in Houston. They drove all night. It's like that. She was great. I was like, well, I missed that one.
Her recording of Constant Craving.
Yeah.
Okay, we're both music guys, and I like production techniques. That may be the most perfectly produced record I've ever heard.
Yeah. She's got a voice, a tool that is few, if any, that even compete with her. So,
well, since we're into music right now, let's just get into it. It's been a big part of your life, obviously something you love. And, you could do some pretty good name dropping here with folks that you have seen and worked with.
Well, and people I've interviewed with TPR has been pretty great. Who's the lead singer from Moody Blues?
Don't recall the gentleman's
Justin
name,
Hayward.
But certainly his voice, yeah.
I've done him twice. Chubby Checker, Joe Ely, if you know him.
I do.
And I got to ask him finally about this. I went to see him in San Angelo, Texas, at a place called the Dixie Club, old school bar, the wooden dance floor and a stage with a picket fence in front of it. Went to see him, and he blew the doors off the place. He was just so good. He had just come off his tour with the Rolling Stones in Europe, where he opened for them.
I remember.
And here he was playing this little dive in San Angelo. And so they played the first set, and it was incredible, just wonderful. They took a break. And then finally the band came back on. It started with this, backbeat thing going on. It was really impressive. No, Joe, where's Joe? And I heard behind me a horse click, 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 click. A horse came in through the front door, went out to the middle of the dance floor. The dancers, spread out. Oh, what's going on? The horse reared up. Joe Ely falls off the back, gets up, runs to the picket fence, jumps it, grabs his microphone, and starts singing right there at the song.
Now that's entertainment. Yeah.
Yeah. And I took several pictures of that night, and I was out of film when the horse appeared. So I don't have any specific evidence of that, but I sure wish I did. He was great.
You mentioned your really incredibly wide range of experiences in broadcasting. What made you want to get into media in the first place? Because I know in my case, I am a naturally curious person.
Yes.
And if something's going on, it might be fun to be there.
Yeah, and that's, I agree with you 100% on that. But I trace back my interest in media to the Dick Van Dyke Show. I mean, I was a kid. I was a little kid when that show came on. And Mary Tyler Moore, she was something. And Dick Van Dyke.
You could say that again.
Yeah. Dick Van Dyke was fun and funny. He wrote comedy in New York City and then took the train to, home to his wife and kids. And
New Rochelle.
Yeah. That's right. And something about that just attracted me. And I kind of stuck it away in the back of my mind. And it was years later, and I was already like 28 or something. And it turned out I knew somebody who worked at KLST in San Angelo. And there was a job opening, and I applied for it. And she called me in and said, well, you better get good at it quick because we can't keep you around if you can't do it. And it was writing, producing, editing, shooting commercials. So I pretty much learned it all right out the gate.
And aren't you glad you did, that you've been exposed to all of that?
Sure.
Oh, what an advantage. You talk about the Dick Van Dyke Show. Some of the most memorable scenes to me as a kid was watching this and the collaborative things with the comedy writing team and how they were coming up with their product. Something clicked in my mind that something like that would be something I would want to do.
It's words is all it is, right?
Yeah.
But putting them together in just a certain way for this person in particular to say, it's magic.
It's nothing short of magic. Let's talk about public broadcasting and public radio a little bit. And obviously there is somewhat of a stereotype about that. And I made some kind of reference to it like a jackass at the beginning of the show. So forgive me for that. But how has public broadcasting changed since you've been in it? And what do you think the public's perception of it is? And what should it be?
Well, it's a good thing you don't ask big questions.
Yeah, well, I only asked 4 of them at one time. Forgive me.
I started my first I've worked at 4 PBS stations in 3 states, and this is my first radio station to work at. I started in '85 at KLRU in Austin, writing, producing, and I was producing all the pledge drives and the auctions, any kind of live events. And it was kind of fly by the seat of your pants productions, really. Pardon me. TV itself has gotten a lot more sophisticated. The graphics, the animations, the editing is, since MTV came about, fast edits and everything has become the norm. So it was a little simpler back in those days, but it had the same general standpoint. PBS public broadcasting it's kind of based on the premise that there's certain things in life that really matter, right? There's kind of a moral backbone to the whole thing. I don't know how to put it really, but you see it in the product and you hear it on the radio. There's an objectivity. It is not there to represent a certain side. Since you can't buy commercials on NPR or PBS, they are not beholden to those who pay their bills. So it's definitely a different beast, than commercial broadcasting. And I don't slam commercial broadcasting, at least not here today, now. But I think there's plenty of room on the spectrum for all of us. But we are a different beast, to be sure.
Everything you just said is accurate. But there is this segment of the population who perceives and accuses you guys of coming at this from a point of view and pushing an agenda. What's your reaction to that?
Well, yesterday, for instance, The Source, our 4 times weekly, hour-long call-in show, David Martin Davies had Will Hurd, former Republican House member who may be positioning himself for bigger things. So yeah, if you look carefully, you'll find that there's all kinds of views represented. That you hear a liberal voice on NPR, that doesn't mean that NPR is liberal. You'll also hear conservative ones as well. And they will both be asked tough questions and probably be made to feel uncomfortable. But that's the nature of the beast. That's journalism. That's what journalism should do to earn its stripes.
I have such respect for public broadcasting, and I think it's made such a contribution. But you hear people, and you've heard it for decades. In fact, I've heard it since I've been cognizant. Why should any public funds fund broadcasting? And I just kind of want to do a facepalm. Why should we support the arts? What was that line about Churchill? They were trying to suspend the arts during World War II. And he was asked, why do you want to sustain the arts?
What are we fighting
What are we fighting for, and why are we fighting this war? Exactly.
Right. I was interviewing the Sebastian Lang-Lessing, the former music director of the San Antonio Symphony, and he said that the city of Berlin, spends more of their tax dollars on public art than the entire United States of America does. I think it was $750 million. And Berlin, of course, is considered a world-class city, probably one of the greatest in the world. I get it. I hear it when people say, "Why should I spend my tax dollar on art?" Well, you know what? When you go around town and you go see the things that make you go, "Oh, that's so wonderful," it's the things far more than not that have been paid for with tax dollars.
Right.
I mean, you go see the Carlos Cortez's art along the Riverwalk, the benches and the big tree limbs holding up the wall behind the Tobin Center. This stuff takes your breath away, and it makes you glad you're a San Antonian. It makes you glad you're an American. It makes you glad that people had the wisdom to do this kind of thing. I mean, the whole Riverwalk really is public funds, right?
Right.
And the Mission Reach and the Museum Reach, it's a series of city dollars, county dollars, national dollars in the name of flood control, because that's really what the Riverwalk was created to do, and that was to control the flooding of downtown San Antonio. All this artwork that we see is wonderful and tremendous, but it also has the premise that it was put there to be a part of a flood control project, because downtown used to, the 1922 flood killing 20 some odd people. There's real reasons for this stuff. And we could have paved it over and gone underground or something with the river for downtown. Would have worked. There wouldn't have been any more floods, but we wouldn't have the Riverwalk, wouldn't we?
You cover so many things and such a wide range of things, which is what's so cool about your job. But regardless of the subject matter, are there common elements of a given story that you find most attractive?
Humanity. I find some of my most frustrating moments that people are the reason for it. People really make me angry sometimes.
They can do that.
But they also provide me with my most wonderful moments. Jesse Trevino, the artist. I don't know if you've seen the side of the old Christus Santa Rosa Hospital. It's 8, 9 stories. It's, Ripley's Believe It or Not. It's the biggest tile mural in the world. It just sits there. I bet you 90% of San Antonians don't know anything about it, or why it's there, or who did the artist was that did it. The artist that did it had his right arm blown off in Vietnam. And he was a painter. He was right-handed. And so he lost his painting arm. And he was in rehab at BAMC and came across a guy named Armando Albarán, who, and by the way, Jesse was in a dark place. He was 19, 20, and he had a great career ahead of him as a painter. He'd gone to an art school in New York City. They paid his tuition because he had so much promise. Then when the government called and says, "We need to send you to Vietnam," he literally was dual citizenship. He could have said, "No, I'm going back to Mexico," and wouldn't have to fight. He went and fought, lost his painting arm, came back, was in BAMC, met Armando Albarán, who had lost his 2 legs. He was in a wheelchair, and he said, Jesse, use your left arm, learn to paint. And Jesse was like, you're crazy, that's not going to happen. And finally, he went out and bought him an easel and paints and brushes and said, okay, it's here, do it, paint me. And so Jesse painted his first portrait with his left hand was of Armando. You can still see that painting. It's not good. It's better than I would do now with my right hand. But Jesse went on to make incredible photorealistic paintings of things. When he was laying in the rice paddy before the helicopter came to get him and life was oozing out of him, he said, if you save me, I'm going to paint the things of my life, of my world, my neighborhood, my people. And he came back to San Antonio and did that. And so people like that, they're the wind under my wings. And if I do any kind of a job at all, then, people who hear the stories have the same experience that I did.
Yeah, the human spirit, and when we hear about and see people overcoming obstacles like that, because we've all encountered obstacles, obviously, not necessarily that severe, but yeah, you're right. It's inspiring to a reporter, and it's really an honor to be in the presence of something like that. But you also realize that if you cast this properly, you may be helping and saving some other people that you don't even know about.
That's true. That's true. I mean, that's what Armando did. I'm sure he didn't measure himself by whether or not he was going to succeed in getting Jesse to come out of his dark place. But he did what he did, and it worked. And I'm sure Jesse has been the inspiration for all kinds of people. He had a whole crew of young people who helped him with the 8-story mural on the south side of Crystal Santa Rosa Hospital. So I'm sure he's been paying it forward all these years.
What's a typical workday like for you?
Well, this morning I went down to the area under Big on the Banks and viewed all the boats that were a part of the Cavaliers parade, and then interviewed the guy who built them all and interviewed the guy with the Cavaliers. Went back to the office and finished off a web story so that it could post about the Mission Reach Flotilla Fiesta that's happening on the Mission Reach on Saturday. And this afternoon I've got an interview with a couple of guys from Corneation, and of course you all shelved in between. So I mean, it's any day. Who knows what's going to happen. I try to plan ahead. I know some things that are upcoming.
Yeah.
And of course I get emails all the time from people looking for publicity and such. But I look for that human touch in there. I look for the thing that, gives me a little flutter and then try to capture that magic in a bottle and put it on the radio.
And story selection is pretty much up to you?
Yeah.
Good.
With very rare exceptions, it's always just me doing it now. I get emails from people saying, I'm doing this thing, or this may be of interest to you. So, I do get help. But yeah, it's pretty much me only.
You were the producer of the really iconic public broadcasting show with Rick Casey. That must have been an amazing experience.
I was the co-producer. Bruce pretty much handled the content, and I was the director of production at KLRN, and so I made sure that the on-air product looked good, was edited right, it flowed, made sense, that kind of stuff. So, Rick Casey's a great guy. The guy you see on screen is pretty much the guy off the screen. He's what was the word? Raconteur. He's fun. He's funny. He's very intelligent, and he knows where all the bodies are buried. And so he finds the right people to talk about issues. So when they found funding for that show, I think this was in the fall, and okay, we're going to name it Texas Week of Rick Casey. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. And it got down to December. We had a January, I believe, due date for the show to start, and I realized there wasn't a budget for like an open. We were going to have to come up with this thing ourselves, and so an artist there said, "I'm going to go for a walk. I'll be back in a couple hours." And he walked all through downtown and took pictures of buildings, right, and of like a little fleur-de-lis, buried into a bridge, or you know what I mean? All these elements of San Antonio that you see or that you maybe miss. And he brought them back to me, and we ingested them all in the computer. We had found a music bed, And then I just started putting these things all together, making them move and everything. And then we created this open. It was like, okay, zero budget, but it works.
I would say it did work. Highly respected show. I have been aware of your content on social media, and I have enjoyed it so much, and the same is true of my wife. And the content is so much fun, and the things that you reference and the things that we see and the places you visit, it strikes me that your days off are just kind of an extension of what you do for a living.
To an extent, that's true. I mean, and to be honest, I kind of view my Facebook page as kind of performance art.
Sure.
You know, I know that sounds weird, but the things that I find hilarious, or, you know, the things that give me pause, you know, or the things that make me think, those are the things that I post on Facebook. And, you know, I didn't have time. I was, you know, this morning, but I was walking across that little bridge just west of Biga, where they've got all the locks that are on the fence.
Yeah.
You know, there are thousands and thousands of locks, and behind each one of those locks is a couple who came there and, you know, put a lock on the bridge to try to secure their future together. And I find that kind of stuff, that really gives me pause, you know. So I don't know if that's the answer to your question, but
I think it is. And it also strikes me, you obviously take pride in seeing details that others might not be aware of.
I do, and some stories come out of that. I remember one year I was walking across this Houston Street Bridge over the San Antonio River, and I looked, and I don't know if you've noticed them or not, but there's these 4 columns, and they are probably this wide, you know, square, and they go up and they get narrower the higher they go. At the top, there's a little light, and on one of them will be Mission Espada, and it'll be like on one side it'll be a map of where they are from this location. On the other side it'll be a shot of them, the way it looks. And of course this stuff is all painted into tile, right, and fired and then put together on this thing. And there's one for Concepcion and San Jose, and you know the last one, whatever it is. But this kind of thing didn't have to, you know. The company that was secured to do those things were secured to do lighting. But someone said, this is an opportunity to do something more interesting than that. And so when I walked across that bridge and I stopped and looked at it and I took in all the detail, I was like, God, how many people would walk by this or drive by this every day and it would never occur to them to stop and look at it? They really should.
You know, it strikes me, Jack, that your stuff and what you do would fly anywhere. But I also think that San Antonio is maybe the perfect environment for you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for one thing, that means I'll be able to work until I can't work anymore because there's so much to cover, right?
Yes.
But also, I'm a big fan of Austin. I lived there 3 times, love the place. But I also pretty much hate it as much as I love it. You know, it's become so enamored of itself.
Forgive me for interrupting, sure. But I was thinking about this. I was in Nashville a couple of years ago, and I've got kind of a marketing mind. And I was thinking that the Nashville Convention and Visitors Bureau ought to have the motto, Nashville, as cool as Austin thinks it is.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. What was the Greek thing where the guy who stopped and looked and saw his reflection in the water, and he became so enamored of himself that he, you know, looking at himself, that he never left, and he ended up dying there. And that's the tree, the cupressus, isn't it cupressus, the
yes.
cypress tree?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the ones that are planted at graveyards, right? To some extent, that reminds me of Austin, and we kind of sit in the shade cast by Austin, right? But I think San Antonio is better. We're more blue collar, real. You know, the artists here create art largely because they can't do anything else. This is what they have to do with life. You know, they were made to do this stuff, and so they do it. Carlos Cortez, you know him, the guy that makes all the
yes.
faux bois stuff. I mean, it's I've got video. I used to shoot video. He was doing his installation down in the museum reach, the grotto, and it must have been 100 plus, and he was out there with a paletta, and then working with a brush with the concrete and the total absolute heat of the day. That's just what he does.
Now, what years were you in Austin?
I was there 3 different times, one like 74, 75, one 72, 73, and then in 85 to 89. Yeah.
Really a fascinating place, and I'm very appreciative and grateful. I started my television career in Austin.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And I loved it at KTBC.
That's where my wife worked.
Absolutely. 10th and Brazos,
That's right.
which at the time was the CBS
That's right.
affiliate. And the interesting thing there is that you had the penthouse above, and this was at a time where Mrs. Johnson, Lady Bird Johnson, was still entitled to Secret Service protection. And Mrs. Johnson had a penthouse above the station. And let me say, first of all, possibly the most gracious human being I've ever met. I mean, I'm, 20 years old or whatever I am. And I'm in the elevator, and I'm like nothing. I'm nobody. And she's Lady Bird Johnson every single morning. Good morning, Paul. How are you? It's just amazing. But the funny thing about this, she was still entitled to Secret Service protection. So, Jack, what they would do, they would
Briefcase.
They would take the crew that had been protecting the sitting president, which is pretty darn stressful. And when they did that stint for several months, they would rotate them off, and you can go protect Mrs. Johnson and play with the grandkids. So these guys, and they're still strapped up, man. I mean, you won't mess with them.
Yeah.
They're down in the lobby, and since I'm the young guy and crazy, and I'll do anything. So I did this one-man KTBC morning news thing, okay? News, weather, sports, the whole thing. But to get in, I had to pound on this metal door, and this is where all the Secret Service guys are flopped out on the couch, and every single morning, bang, bang, bang. Hey, fellas, it's Paul. Don't shoot.
This is funny. I have in common an experience with Lady Bird in the elevator. I was down at the elevator open. She got on with a little girl and a Secret Service guy. And I've met a lot of famous people, and I don't get to, it's like, I was like, hi, I didn't really want to say anything. And we went up, and it was funny because years later I worked at WOAI TV, and I was a promotion guy, and I would write promos, and a lot of the things we wrote were about people, and a lot of them were, like politicians and such. You had to be real careful, and we had an attorney that we would send off this our copy to in Austin, who would then approve it or make changes.
Yeah.
And I called her on the phone one day, and turned out this was Lady Bird's granddaughter who worked at that firm. She was approving my copy, and I said, I think I went up with you in an elevator one time at KTBC. Said, oh, yeah, Grandma's apartment,
I think we are talking about the same attorney who was the media station attorney for a television station in Corpus Christi at which I used to be the news director. So I think we're talking about the same person.
You don't remember her name, do you?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, well.
I would have if you had asked me 10 minutes ago, but I'm an old guy.
The chances of it being a different person are probably very slim. I'm sure that was a very sharp, neat person. So.
Yeah. Saved my bacon any number of times.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
great.
You can't say that. What are you thinking?
I don't know what I was thinking. Thank you for telling me what I was thinking for sure. All right, so how can you not love a media guy who was a radio DJ and his on-air name was Robin Banks?
Right.
I mean, nothing else needs to be said.
When I got started in radio, I didn't want my actual name associated with whatever on-air. In radio, people can't see who you are, and so I was like, what can I call myself? And it was down between Doug Graves or Robin Banks. So I went with Robin Banks, and it was like, I'd go on the air and say, I'm Robin Banks, and I'm still not making any money, and go on to the song. It was cheesy, but it was...
What was that John Dillinger line? Why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is.
Right.
I'm sure you were just covered up in money in that job, too.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
sure. You did it for no other reason than just the money.
And, of course, the status as well. Right?
Yeah. Who doesn't love that? You make a living talking to people, and you're extremely good at it. But there is this polarization going on now the likes of which I've never seen before. And I know how it affects me and my job and my professional efforts, et cetera, and also how it affects my state of mind, because I realize that in some respects, we're in a really dark place right now. How do you respond to that? What do you see? And how does that impact your job?
It's tough stuff. I remember, I've worked in TV and radio since the early 80s. And I used to work Ken's TV, Chris Maru, Dan Cook, all those folks. And, of course, at KSAT and at KMOL, now WOAI. I worked with all those folks. And I was thinking back a while back that I really couldn't tell you what their politics were. Right? I worked with them closely every day. A lot of interchange, but I really could not tell you who Bob Salt, what Bob Salter, who he would have voted for. Chris Maru I could probably nail him, but not by much. But that's the way it was. It's like we didn't think that our darkest views on whatever politician or whatever issue had to be in your face back then. We could treat with one another with respect and go about our daily function without having to slap somebody else verbally about what they believe about the world.
So do you think that in any way the media coarsening, for lack of a better term, that you're referencing, has that made the rest of us more coarse?
Maybe. I trace it back to Rush Limbaugh, to be honest. Rush Limbaugh came along and was creative in the way he positioned what it was that he was doing. And he made it to where you didn't just disagree with someone. That person with whom you disagree is trying to destroy the country. Mm-hmm.
The enemy.
They're the enemy. They're a bad person. They're not just someone I disagree with. They're a bad person. And it became okay to start calling them names. And you and I come from a simpler time where, it's not like there wasn't a lack of passion back then about people's beliefs, but you could go and have a burger with them afterwards, regardless of what they thought. They weren't a bad person. Their views did not make them a bad person. You just disagreed with them. And that has largely ebbed away. As far as the coarsening of the dialogue, I come from the NPR PBS viewpoint, and we're just not coarse. It's not to say we can't, people can't express their opinion or be passionate about their beliefs, but we don't tolerate name calling. We don't tolerate, lessening someone as a human being just because we disagree with what they're saying.
One of the reasons that you are good at what you do is that you are an excellent listener. Is the absence of listening skills the thing that's getting us in the trouble we're so clearly in right now?
I think it's very much a possibility because as someone is saying something, a real part of the population is going, how can I respond to this? Rather than just taking it in and evaluating it for its merits or lack of them. It's like, how can I get back on them? And again, I trace this kind of thing back to Rush Limbaugh, to where it didn't just make the person someone of opposing views, it made them the enemy. It made them a bad person. So.
Over the course of this podcast, because our producer, Nick, is a genius, we're interspersing photographs of your life and your career, and I think they illustrate the things we've been talking about, that you have such a wide range of interests, and you obviously love life, and you have an appreciation for people. And you're rightly proud of all the things that you've done in your life, but I'm perceiving that with you, it's all about next. So what's next?
I am of retirement age. Most people my age, even younger, have retired, and I have no interest in that. I mean, the job that I do at TPR, it's like, oh boy, I get to go to work today. A lot of people get up and just go, oh God, I'm working for the weekend. I'm not that guy. What I do is fun. It enlivens me. I often think, what did I do to deserve this job? Really, right? So I have no aspiration to quit. I do make stained glass, and I've thought that I will try to elevate that once I retire. I've been doing it for decades. I'm not brand new at it, but I just don't ever really try to get new work because I'm so busy with what I do. And I've got a house and a wife and grandkids, a lot of things to maintain elsewise. So I haven't been looking around wondering what I'm going to be doing next. It's all right there on my doorstep.
That's really wonderful. What I've always said is, you've got a good professional life when you don't fear Monday.
Yeah. Greg Durkowski, do you know him? He was a boss of mine at WOAI for a while, and he called it the freeway exit test. If you get up to the exit to where you got to exit to get off to go to your job, and you just want to keep going, you're in the wrong job. So.
Well, you have been very blessed and very fortunate, but we as information consumers and citizens, very blessed by your work for sure.
Thank you.
What is the takeaway that you would want people to have about public broadcasting in general, what it's about, and what you would like for them to understand about it?
You mentioned a while ago the coarsening of the dialogue, and especially in media. I want to let people know who don't listen to NPR, who don't go to PBS, that there's a lot of good stuff there, day in, day out. I know once I got onto the NPR bandwagon, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. It was like a light went off, and I go, this is good stuff. These are real people telling me things that I really need to know. And so I recommend people that they at least sample it and give it a try, because it seems kind of cheesy, but the people with NPR do believe in the possibilities. They do believe that if you know more, you will be a smarter person, and a smarter person casts a wiser vote. And, there's those who say that we end up with a representation in Washington, D.C. and in Austin that we deserve. And I think they're kind of right. I think we need to deserve better, and the way to deserve better is to be more informed, mm-hmm. and to be more contemplative, about what matters in this world. And NPR and PBS are two good sources for things to find out, what matters in the world.
Man, that's almost standing ovation time. Because, as you know, on Radically Rational, one of our sub-positioning lines is bringing facts back into fashion, because clearly they're out of fashion. And I would postulate that that's why we're in the ditch we're in, because we have people who don't even acknowledge the existence or even the concept of facts. And what I've found is that embracing facts is not only intellectually stimulating, it is spiritually absolutely liberating. You'll be a happier person if you actually confront facts.
It's okay to have your concepts challenged, right? And facts will do that.
It's a good thing.
It doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right or wherever, that the facts that you'll come across will make you think, and it ain't always easy, to think things that aren't comfortable, but that's the way it's got to be.
One of the things we try to do here is deliver truth in advertising, and we started this interview by saying you were just a party waiting to happen, man, and you delivered across the board, man. This is great.
Did I miss the beer? I didn't.
Hey, you gotta know something about Game Day Media here, which is where we do this podcast. They're the leading podcast producing house in the country. They're really good, and they got this whole thing nailed down. Trust me, they know what they're doing. Jack, what an absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. I've really followed your career, and I get so much enjoyment out of your social media content. Looking forward to this episode, and you delivered in every way. So thank you.
Well, thank you. It's good to finally spend some time with you.
We will do this again for sure. So we thank Jack. We thank you for listening and watching. We do want to refer you to our website at radicallyrational.com, which is pretty much all about the party anyway. But we've got a daily news blog, a daily sports blog, daily videos, and all of these wonderful podcasts are archived. So again, we thank you, and we will see you next time on Radically Rational.